What if I told you that everything that you think you know about the coronavirus is a lie? That you are right now witnessing the largest, costliest, deadliest cover-up in world history. Would you believe me? What if you saw hard evidence and you started asking the scary questions? Why don't you watch? Decide for yourself.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak.
The Chinese coronavirus pandemic will be recorded as one of the most consequential global events in world history. How the hell did this happen? Who's responsible? What you're about to hear is a true story, backed by scientific evidence and hard facts. There are those who witnessed what happened. People died to tell you this story. Listen to them, because otherwise, it is going to happen again. New Year's Eve. Tens of millions of people are gathering to celebrate with their families. But in one of China's largest cities, the streets are eerily silent. Wuhan is located in the heart of China and home to more than 11 million people. Word has gotten out that there is a killer on the streets. A unique and deadly virus was spreading through the city's population at a blistering pace, and no one has any idea how to treat it or where it came from. 1 month earlier, an elderly Chinese man was admitted to the Wuhan hospital with extreme difficulty breathing and signs of pneumonia. This is the first case on record of COVID-19. As the month of December pressed on, hospital wards in Wuhan exploded with cases of the unique pneumonia. Chinese doctors and medical staff began to come down with the same symptoms, indicating the terrifying prospect of human-to-human transmission. On December 30th, a Chinese ophthalmologist named Dr. Li Wenliang warned on social media of a respiratory illness ravaging the city. Wenliang was punished and silenced by local communist authorities. In 1 month, Dr. Wenliang would be dead, killed by the virus that had already taken the lives of thousands. The exact number of dead we don't know, and we likely never will. Realizing the disaster on their hands, the Communist Party of China brutally locked down the city of Wuhan. We know the Communist Party of China's secrecy, blame shifting, denial, and inability to act in this pandemic resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans, hundreds of thousands more around the world, all while decimating the economy. What we don't know is where the virus came from. How did it get here? Why is it so deadly? For clues on these questions, we will go to ground zero in Wuhan, focusing on what Chinese scientists, medical experts, and local officials had to say about this outbreak before the communist government stepped in and silenced them all. Let's start with what we know. There are two elements in this outbreak that have universal scientific consensus. One, the genome sequence of the virus is of bat origin and is specific to a species of bat known as the horseshoe bat. Two, the virus is genetically optimal for human transmission, while most viruses are not. This is what makes it so deadly. So the question is this: how did this specific virus jump from bat to human? The official Communist Party endorsed theory is that the jump occurred at the Hunan seafood wholesale market in Wuhan. However, this theory begins to fall apart when data from the original outbreak is examined. According to Chinese scientific papers published in January, studying the initial outbreak, 1/2 of the original cases had no exposure to the seafood market whatsoever. The alleged patient zero in December had no history with the seafood market at all. Furthermore, investigators and researchers found no evidence of the intermediate horseshoe bat, or any bats for that matter, being sold at the market. Further research from Chinese scientists showed that bats were never a food source for local residents of Wuhan. In fact, there are no known colonies of the horseshoe bat within 600 miles of Wuhan. The natural habitat for these bats are in secluded, high, dark mountain caves in the south of China. So how did these rare and dangerous animals get into the densely populated city center? For the answer to these questions, we turn to the writings and findings of two Chinese researchers. Researchers Zhao Botao from South China University of Technology and Lei Zhao from Wuhan University of Science and Technology set out to establish the most likely source of the virus. Their research thesis is entitled The Possible Origins of the 2019 Coronavirus. The respected Chinese scientists immediately rule out the Wuhan seafood market as the source of the virus and began a search for an alternative location where we have proof of horseshoe bats and humans interacting. The Wuhan Institute of Virology is a Chinese government-run research center 2 miles from the Wuhan seafood market. This institute is famous for its research on bat coronaviruses and was actively researching new coronaviruses, specifically in horseshoe bats at the time of the outbreak. Leading up this research was Shi Zhenli, a woman who has earned the nickname Batwoman for her 17 years of researching coronaviruses in bats. Make no mistake, Zhenli is the world's foremost expert in researching bat coronaviruses and their transmission to humans. Zhenli's research often takes her into remote caves where the bats dwell in order to harvest them and bring them back to her laboratory in Wuhan. Further analysis of Zhenli's academic publishings show controversial research into synthetic viruses. Shi Zhenli published multiple scientific papers on the creation of the bat coronavirus for the study of cross-species transmission. A year before the outbreak, in 2018, she gave a speech on bat coronaviruses and their cross-species infection ability. So why is Zhenli's research important? COVID-19 is particularly deadly due to its unique molecular capacity to enter human cells and destroy them. You have likely seen this photo of the coronavirus. This specific part of the virus is called an S protein. These proteins act as the key to unlocking the human cells that they come in contact with, allowing the contents of the coronavirus to enter the cell and destroy it. Zhenli's lab had sophisticated capacities to synthesize viruses for cross-species transmission, often using the S protein. The Epoch Times spoke with noted microbiologist PhD Judy Mikovits and virologist Dr. Sean Lin, who cast extreme scientific doubts on the origins of the virus simply originating organically.
Virus now can infect human cell much easier, and that's probably also one of the important reasons contributing to multi-organ failure when people have a very severe disease. So it can spread out in the human body much faster.
And so we know that's the pathogenic spike protein that for the original SARS. So now you're allowing that access to human tissues because the spike proteins of the natural evolutionary strains don't infect human cells at all. So that research has been going on at Wuhan and published since 2007. And clearly, if that spike protein from SARS weren't on the new COVID-19 or SARS-2, it wouldn't be able to enter human cells. So again, this is evidence that it couldn't go through the Wuhan seafood market.
A job posting on the Wuhan Institute of Virology website on November 18, 2019 asked for scientists to come research the relationship between the coronavirus and bats. On December 24, 2019, as COVID-19 was savaging the population of Wuhan, the Institute posted a second job opening, urgently announcing that they had discovered a large number of new bat viruses and their infection mechanisms that could transmit to humans. At the beginning of the outbreak, Shi Zhenli is quoted openly in the press as wondering, could the virus have come from our lab? The independent Chinese researchers investigating the outbreak noted that scientists in the lab have a history of being infected with bat coronaviruses. Scientists in the lab have reported getting attacked by the bats and splattered with bat blood and bat urine. The Wuhan lab had such a known security problem that the US Embassy in Beijing took some extraordinary actions to warn them about it. In January 2018, the embassy sent 2 US science diplomats to the Wuhan Virology Institute. Sloppiness, carelessness, lack of safety, or management of the lab so shocked the American scientists that they urgently wrote a series of diplomatic cables back to America warning of the potential of an imminent outbreak. The cable reads, most importantly, the researchers showed that various SARS-like coronaviruses can interact with the human receptor identified for SARS coronavirus. The findings strongly suggest that SARS-like coronaviruses from bats can be transmitted to humans to cause SARS-like diseases. The person the US scientific diplomats were the most worried about? Researcher Shi Zhenli. Since the coronavirus outbreak, the Wuhan Virology Lab has experienced extremely unusual behavior. A memo from the Director General of the Virology Institute ordered the silencing of all scientists and researchers on the topic of the coronavirus outbreak or bat studies. The Communist Party then installed the top military biochemical weapons expert to oversee the operations of the lab. More disturbing still, since the outbreak, researchers on the bat coronavirus team have gone missing. In January, the Beijing News identified Huan Yangling, a researcher at the Institute of Virology, as the suspected real patient zero. Yangling was allegedly the first human to contract COVID-19 during a botched experiment. Mysteriously, Yangling has been scrubbed from the virology lab website, even while other researchers remain. The institute initially denied any knowledge of Huang Yangling, but was forced to retract their denial and admit that the researcher has now unaccounted for. Ultimately, the Chinese researchers studying the origins of the outbreak concluded their thesis by stating, "The killer coronavirus probably originated from the laboratory in Wuhan. Safety levels need to be reinforced in high-risk biohazardous laboratories. Regulations may be taken to relocate the laboratories far away from the city center and other densely populated places." But it's not just these Chinese scientists who are raising suspicions. The UK's Emergency Coronavirus Committee said that it is not a coincidence that the virology laboratory in Wuhan was studying bat coronavirus, and the lab should not be discounted as the possible source of the outbreak. American microbiologist Professor Richard Ebright, a biosecurity expert, warned that the safety levels of the Wuhan lab were woefully lacking. He writes that given the nature of their dangerous experiments, an outbreak in the lab would pose a substantial risk of infection of a lab worker, and from the lab worker to the general public. At the present date, the tide seems to be turning against the Wuhan lab.
It is increasingly likely, there is increasing confidence that the virus, COVID-19, started in that Wuhan lab.
As of today, says someone in a position to know, there is, quote, almost unanimous agreement in the American intelligence gathering agencies that the virus currently destroying much of the world emerged from a lab in Wuhan.
The NIH gives this $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They then advertise that they need coronavirus researchers. Following that, coronavirus erupts in Wuhan. And then what's really troubling to me is that either conspicuously or miraculously, the Wuhan Institute of Virology is able to sequence the virus on January 2nd, but China doesn't admit to the virus existing to January 9th, and then the Wuhan Institute of Virology doesn't release this important scientific information to the world until January 12th. So at best, Americans are funding people who are lying to us, and at worst, we're funding people who we knew had problems handling pathogens, who then birthed a monster virus onto the world.
The question is, have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Beijing has yet to provide U.S. experts with samples of the novel coronavirus collected from the earliest cases. Several of the doctors and journalists who reported on the spread of the virus have disappeared. The Chinese government, meanwhile, has put a total lockdown on information related to the virus origins. Without this information, we will never understand how the coronavirus pandemic started, or how to prevent the next one.